There is a quiet tragedy happening inside millions of people every single day. It isn't visible. No one posts about it. No one applauds when someone survives another battle with their own thoughts. It happens silently. A person wakes up, looks into the mirror, and immediately begins criticizing the face, looking back. Not beautiful enough. Not successful enough. Not smart enough. Not worthy enough. Before the world has spoken a single word, their own mind has already become their harshest judge. It is strange, isn't it? We comfort strangers. We encourage friends. We forgive the people we love. Yet somehow, when it comes to ourselves, compassion disappears. Instead of kindness, we offer criticism. Instead of patience, we demand perfection. Instead of forgiveness, we replay every mistake we've ever made. Oscar Wilde once wrote, "To love oneself is the beginning of a lifelong romance." At first glance, it sounds poetic, almost romantic. But hidden inside those few words is one of the greatest psychological truths about human happiness. Because the longest relationship you will ever have is not with your parents, not with your partner, not with your children, not even with your closest friends. It is with yourself. Every single day of your life, there is one person who hears every thought you think, one person who witnesses every success, every embarrassment, every dream, every disappointment. That person is you. Imagine spending decades living beside someone who constantly insults you, someone who reminds you every morning that you're not enough, someone who compares you to everyone else, someone who never celebrates your victories because they always expect more. Eventually, that relationship would become unbearable. Yet many people, unknowingly, create exactly this relationship with themselves. They become prisoners inside their own minds. The saddest part is that they believe this inner cruelty is normal. Some even believe it keeps them motivated. If I'm hard on myself, I'll improve. If I criticize myself, I'll avoid failure. If I demand perfection, I'll become successful. But psychology tells a different story. Research repeatedly shows that excessive self-criticism doesn't create lasting excellence. It creates anxiety, fear, procrastination, burnout. Because a mind living in constant attack cannot also live in peace. Think back to your childhood. Were there moments when you made mistakes? Of course, every child does. Now imagine if every mistake had been met, not with guidance but humiliation, not with encouragement but rejection. Eventually, that child would stop exploring, stop trying, stop believing. Many adults unknowingly continue that pattern inside themselves. The critical voice of yesterday becomes the permanent narrator of today. Sometimes that voice came from impossible expectations. Sometimes from parents who believed love had to be earned. Sometimes from teachers. Sometimes from classmates. Sometimes from heartbreak. Sometimes from failure. Over time, those outside voices move inside. Eventually, we no longer need anyone else to criticize us. We become experts at doing it ourselves. And perhaps that is the greatest theft of all. Because confidence isn't destroyed overnight. It disappears one tiny thought at a time. I'm not attractive enough. I'm too old. I'm too late. I'm not talented. They're better than me. I always ruin everything. One sentence, then another, until years later, we mistake those thoughts for reality. But they were never facts. They were habits. Habits repeated so often that they began wearing the mask of truth. Have you ever noticed how easily we believe negative things about ourselves? Someone gives us one compliment. We dismiss it. They're just being nice. Someone criticizes us once. We remember it for years. Our minds evolved to detect danger. Unfortunately, emotional danger counts too. The brain stores rejection more carefully than praise. This explains why so many successful people still secretly believe they aren't enough. Achievements cannot erase beliefs that were never questioned. People imagine confidence comes after success. The truth is often the opposite. Healthy confidence allows success to grow. And healthy confidence begins with something surprisingly simple. Treating yourself like someone worthy of love. Not because you've earned it. Not because you've become perfect. Simply because you exist. Imagine meeting someone who has experienced everything you've experienced. They survived every heartbreak you survived. Every disappointment. Every lonely night. Every silent tear. Every impossible decision. Would you hate that person? Or would your heart naturally soften toward them? Now realize something extraordinary. That person already exists. It is you. Perhaps the greatest act of courage is not climbing mountains, not building companies, not becoming famous. Perhaps the greatest courage is looking honestly at yourself and choosing compassion anyway. Because self-love does not begin after transformation. It begins before transformation. A flower doesn't bloom because someone first proves it deserves sunlight. It blooms because sunlight is freely given. Human beings are not so different. The more kindness we receive, especially from ourselves, the more we naturally grow. Many people spend decades searching for someone who will finally make them feel complete. They believe one perfect relationship will silence their insecurities forever. But relationships cannot permanently solve problems that were created inside our relationship with ourselves. A partner can say, "I love you," but if your inner voice keeps whispering, "I'm unlovable," whose voice do you think you'll believe? That is why external love often feels temporary. Compliments fade. Applause ends. Beauty changes. Success rises and falls. But the relationship with yourself remains. Every day, every year, for your entire life. And perhaps that is exactly why Oscar Wilde called it a lifelong romance. Not because life becomes perfect, but because every single day offers another opportunity to choose yourself again. Not through vanity, not through selfishness, but through quiet acceptance, through forgiveness, through patience, through understanding. Real self-love isn't standing in front of the mirror, declaring perfection. It is looking honestly at your imperfections and deciding they do not cancel your worth. The world constantly teaches us to earn love, earn respect, earn attention, earn value. But maybe, just maybe, our greatest freedom begins the moment we stop earning and simply start accepting. Acceptance, however, is not the end of the journey. It is only the first step. Because after years of living with an inner critic, simply deciding to be kinder to yourself does not magically silence that voice. It still appears when you make mistakes. It still whispers when you compare yourself to others. It still questions your worth whenever life becomes difficult. The difference is that now you begin to recognize that voice for what it truly is. Not the truth, only an old habit. Many of us inherited that habit long before we realized it. As children, we learned to associate love with achievement. Good grades earned praise. Perfect behavior earned approval. Success brought attention. Failure often brought disappointment. Without realizing it, we absorbed a dangerous message. I am loved because of what I do. Instead of, I am loved because of who I am. That distinction changes everything. If your value depends on performance, then every failure becomes an identity crisis. Every rejection feels like proof that you are not enough. Every comparison becomes another reason to dislike yourself. You begin living as though your worth is constantly on trial. But human value does not work that way. Think about someone you deeply care about. Perhaps a child, a sibling, a close friend. Would you stop loving them because they failed one exam? Would you decide they were worthless because they made a poor decision? Would you abandon them because they had a difficult year? Of course not. You would remind them that one moment does not define an entire life. So why is it so difficult to offer yourself the same grace? The answer is not weakness. It is familiarity. You have listened to your own thoughts every day for years. When an idea is repeated often enough, it begins to sound like reality. I'll never be good enough. I'm always behind. I should already have everything figured out. These thoughts become background noise. Eventually, you stop questioning them. But imagine hearing someone speak to another person the way you sometimes speak to yourself. Imagine saying to a friend, "You'll never succeed. You always ruin everything. No one will truly love you." It would sound cruel, heartless, even abusive. Yet countless people repeat those same sentences silently inside their own minds every single day. And because no one else hears them, no one realizes how much damage they cause. Our inner dialogue shapes the way we experience the world. If your mind constantly tells you that you are inadequate, even joyful moments become difficult to enjoy. A compliment feels suspicious. An opportunity feels intimidating. A relationship feels fragile. Instead of embracing happiness, you wait for it to disappear. You become so accustomed to expecting disappointment that peace itself begins to feel unfamiliar. This is why self-love is not merely about feeling better. It is about changing the environment in which every thought grows. A flower planted in poor soil struggles to bloom no matter how much sunlight it receives. Likewise, a person surrounded by self-hatred struggles to accept love, success, or joy, no matter how much life offers them. Your inner world becomes the soil from which your entire life grows. When that soil is filled with shame, everything feels heavy. When it is filled with compassion, even difficult seasons become survivable. This does not mean life suddenly becomes easy. Self-love is not a magical shield against pain. You will still lose people. You will still make mistakes. You will still experience failure. The difference is that those experiences no longer convince you that you are unworthy. Pain becomes an event, not an identity. There is incredible freedom in that realization. Failure says, I failed. Self-hatred says, I am a failure. One describes an action. The other attacks a person's existence. Learning the difference changes how you recover from adversity. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me? You begin asking, what can I learn from this? Instead of punishing yourself for being imperfect, you become curious about your own growth. Curiosity heals far more effectively than condemnation ever could. Notice how children learn. They fall hundreds of times before they walk. No one expects perfection from a toddler. Every stumble is celebrated because it represents progress. Adults often forget this wisdom. We expect ourselves to master life immediately. We become embarrassed by learning, ashamed of uncertainty, afraid of looking inexperienced. But growth has never required perfection. It only requires persistence. Some of the happiest people you will ever meet are not those with flawless lives. They are people who stopped believing they had to earn the right to exist peacefully. They laugh at their mistakes. They apologize without drowning in shame. They celebrate small victories. They rest without feeling guilty. They understand something many people spend decades trying to learn. Their worth was never something to achieve. It was something they already possessed. Consider nature for a moment. The sun does not apologize for shining. The ocean does not compare itself to the mountains. A tree does not feel ashamed because another tree grows taller. Everything simply becomes what it was created to become. Human beings, however, often forget this simplicity. We compare timelines, appearances, careers, relationships, bank accounts, social media followers, and with every comparison, we quietly tell ourselves, my life would matter more if I were someone else. But there has never been another person exactly like you. There never will be. Your experiences, your scars, your dreams, your perspective, these are unrepeatable. That uniqueness is not something to hide. It is something to honor. Ironically, the more you accept yourself, the less energy you waste pretending to be someone else. Authenticity becomes effortless, and authenticity attracts healthier relationships than perfection ever could. People do not connect most deeply with flawless individuals. They connect with honest ones. Someone willing to admit fear. Someone willing to admit uncertainty. Someone who is comfortable enough with themselves that they no longer need to perform for approval. That kind of confidence is quiet. It does not demand attention. It does not seek constant validation. It simply exists. Perhaps that is what true self-love looks like. Not standing above others. Not believing you are better than anyone else. But finally, believing you are not less. It is recognizing that your value cannot increase through applause, nor decrease through criticism, because your value was never determined by other people's opinions in the first place. When you understand this deeply, something remarkable happens. You stop chasing every opportunity to prove yourself. Instead, you begin choosing opportunities that genuinely align with your heart. You stop asking, will they approve of me? And begin asking, does this reflect the person I want to become? That single shift changes careers, number, friendships, relationships, dreams, even the way you spend ordinary mornings. Little by little, your life stops revolving around fear and starts revolving around authenticity. That is where lasting peace begins. Not in having everything, but in no longer believing that you are nothing without it. But understanding self-love is only half the journey. Knowledge alone rarely changes a life. Almost everyone already knows they should be kinder to themselves. The real question is different. How do you actually begin? How do you change a relationship that has been built over decades? The answer is both simpler and more difficult than most people expect. You begin with the smallest moments, not with dramatic transformations, not with grand declarations, but with ordinary choices repeated every day. Think about how trust is built between two people. It doesn't appear overnight. Trust grows because someone consistently shows up. They keep their promises. They listen. They remain present during difficult times. Eventually, you feel safe with them. Now ask yourself a powerful question. Have you become someone that your future self can trust? Or have you spent years breaking promises to yourself? I'll rest after this. I'll start tomorrow. I'll take care of myself someday. I'll finally be happy when. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next year. One day you realize you have spent decades postponing your own well-being. Life quietly passed while you were waiting for permission to enjoy it. Self-love begins the moment you stop postponing yourself. It begins when you recognize that your needs are not inconveniences. Your emotions are not weaknesses. Your dreams are not childish fantasies. They deserve attention, simply because they belong to you. One of the most powerful habits you can develop is learning to observe your thoughts without immediately believing them. Imagine sitting beside a river. Leaves float gently across the water. Some are beautiful. Some are damaged. Some disappear quickly. Your thoughts are much the same. Not every thought deserves your trust. A thought that says, "I'm not enough," is still only a thought. It is not evidence. It is not destiny. It is simply a passing leaf. The more you practice observing your mind, instead of becoming trapped inside it, the more freedom you experience. You begin creating space between who you are and what you think. That space changes everything, because inside that space lives choice. You can choose compassion instead of criticism, patience instead of frustration, curiosity instead of shame. Healing rarely happens through force. It happens through gentleness. Many people imagine personal growth as climbing a mountain. Constant effort, relentless discipline, endless pushing. Sometimes growth looks like that. But often, healing resembles tending a garden. You cannot force flowers to bloom. You water them, protect them, give them sunlight. Then you wait, patiently. Your heart deserves the same care. Too often we expect emotional wounds to disappear simply because time has passed. But time alone heals very little. Attention heals. Understanding heals. Forgiveness heals. Presence heals. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack every day for years. Eventually, your shoulders ache so constantly that you stop noticing the pain. Then one day someone helps you remove it. At first the relief feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. That is exactly how self-compassion can feel. People who have criticized themselves for decades often feel guilty the first time they choose kindness, almost as though they no longer deserve discipline. But kindness is not laziness. Compassion is not weakness. In fact, the strongest people are often those who know how to encourage themselves during failure instead of destroying themselves because of it. Think about athletes. The greatest coaches do not spend every practice screaming insults. They correct. They encourage. They inspire. They believe improvement is possible. Imagine if your own inner voice became that kind of coach. Instead of saying, "You always fail," it whispered, "You've learned before. You can learn again." Instead of, "You're hopeless," it said, "This is difficult. Take one more step." The words are small. The impact is enormous, because every sentence you repeat becomes part of your identity. Another essential part of self-love is learning to celebrate progress instead of perfection. Perfection is a moving target. No matter how much you achieve, it always demands more. Progress, however, allows gratitude. Perhaps today you handled stress slightly better than yesterday. Perhaps you apologized more sincerely. Perhaps you rested when your body needed it. Perhaps you simply survived a difficult week. Those moments matter. Growth is rarely dramatic. It often looks invisible while it is happening. Consider how trees grow. You cannot watch a tree become taller in real time. Yet season after season, it transforms. People grow the same way, quietly, patiently, almost invisibly, until one day they realize they have become someone they once desperately needed. There is another lesson that self-love teaches. Not everyone will understand the new version of you. Some people became comfortable with the version of you who always said yes, who never complained, who ignored their own needs, who constantly sacrificed themselves to keep everyone else happy. The moment you begin setting healthy boundaries, those people may accuse you of changing. And they are right. You have changed. Because love without boundaries becomes exhaustion. Generosity without limits becomes self-neglect. Kindness that excludes yourself eventually turns into resentment. Healthy relationships do not require you to disappear. They allow both people to exist fully. Learning to say no is not rejection. Sometimes it is the purest form of self-respect. Every boundary quietly says, "My well-being matters too." That simple sentence has the power to transform an entire life. As your relationship with yourself improves, something unexpected begins happening. The approval of strangers becomes less addictive. Social media comparisons lose some of their power. Criticism hurts less. Compliments become easier to accept. Not because life has changed, but because your source of worth has changed. It no longer depends entirely on the outside world. Instead, it grows from within. That inner stability becomes one of the greatest gifts self-love can offer. Storms still arrive. Disappointments still happen. But you stop feeling as though every challenge can destroy you, because you have finally become someone who stands beside yourself, no matter what happens. Perhaps that is the deepest meaning hidden inside Oscar Wilde's famous words. A lifelong romance is not built upon constant excitement. Real love survives ordinary days, misunderstandings, failures, imperfections, growth, forgiveness, choosing each other again and again. The relationship with yourself deserves that same devotion, not because you are flawless, but because you are human, and every human heart deserves a place where it is welcomed without conditions. That place can become your own heart. When it does, the world outside may still be uncertain, but the world within finally becomes home. Home. It is a simple word, yet one of the most powerful in the human language. When people hear the word home, they rarely think about walls or furniture. They think about a place where they can finally stop pretending. A place where they do not have to earn the right to exist. A place where they are accepted, even on their worst days. For many people, however, there is a heartbreaking contradiction. They have found homes in cities, homes in relationships, homes in careers, yet they have never felt at home within themselves. No matter where they go, they carry an invisible tension, a quiet feeling that they must always become more before they are allowed to feel enough. They postpone peace. I'll love myself after I lose the weight. I'll finally be proud of myself after I earn more money. Once I achieve success, then I'll be happy. The destination keeps moving. Every milestone gives birth to another condition, another expectation, another impossible standard. Eventually, they discover something painful. The life they were chasing has arrived, but the happiness they expected never came with it, because the problem was never outside. It was the relationship they carried within. Imagine filling a bucket with water while there is a hole in the bottom. You can keep pouring more and more into it, but it will never stay full. External achievements often work the same way. Promotion, awards, luxury, recognition. None of these things are wrong. They can enrich life, but they cannot permanently fill a heart that has learned to reject itself. This is why some of the most admired people in the world still struggle with insecurity. Why successful entrepreneurs question their worth. Why celebrated artists battle self-doubt. Why beautiful people still feel unattractive. Because self-worth cannot be borrowed. It must be built, brick by brick. Choice by choice, day by day, one conversation with yourself at a time. There is a story often told about a sculptor creating a magnificent statue from a block of marble. Someone asked him, "How did you create something so beautiful?" The sculptor smiled and replied, "I simply removed everything that wasn't part of the statue." Perhaps self-love works in much the same way. You do not need to become someone entirely new. You simply need to remove what never truly belonged to you. The shame that someone else planted, the labels that others gave you, the impossible standards that society convinced you to chase, the belief that your value depends on perfection. Piece by piece, those false identities begin to fall away. What remains is not a new person. It is the person who was always there beneath the fear. Think back to the younger version of yourself, the child who laughed without worrying how they looked, who asked questions without fearing judgment, who dreamed without calculating the odds. That child did not disappear. Life simply buried them beneath expectations, responsibilities, heartbreak, comparison, fear. Self-love is not about inventing someone better. It is about remembering someone you forgot. Perhaps that is why healing often feels less like learning and more like remembering. Remembering that your mistakes are chapters, not the title of your story. Remembering that your scars prove survival, not weakness. Remembering that your sensitivity is not something to hide, but evidence that your heart is still capable of feeling deeply. Many people believe strength means becoming emotionally untouchable, never crying, never struggling, never asking for help. But genuine strength looks very different. Real strength is the courage to remain open after disappointment, to remain kind after betrayal, to remain hopeful after failure. Most importantly, to remain compassionate toward yourself when life does not unfold according to your plans. Because there will be days when you fall short, days when you lose your temper, days when anxiety returns, days when old insecurities suddenly reappear. Those moments do not erase your growth. Healing is not a straight line. It is more like the changing seasons. Winter does not mean the tree has died. It only means growth is happening beneath the surface. Your difficult seasons deserve the same understanding. Some days, your only achievement may be getting out of bed. Some days, your greatest victory may be choosing not to believe the voice that tells you are worthless. Those victories may never receive applause, but they matter, perhaps more than anyone else will ever know. The world often celebrates visible success, the promotion, the graduation, the championship, the award. But the quiet victories are just as extraordinary. Choosing forgiveness over bitterness, choosing honesty over pretending, choosing rest instead of constant exhaustion, choosing self-respect instead of endless people-pleasing. These are the moments that slowly reshape a human life. Transformation rarely announces itself. It whispers, one healthy decision, then another, one kinder thought, then another, one boundary, one apology, one moment of courage, until years later, you realize that the person standing in the mirror no longer feels like a stranger. You recognize them, not because they became perfect, but because they finally became authentic. Perhaps that is the greatest romance Oscar Wilde was describing. Not romance as excitement, not romance as fantasy, but romance as commitment. The daily decision to remain faithful to yourself, to encourage yourself when life becomes difficult, to forgive yourself after failure, to believe in yourself when evidence feels scarce, to remain beside yourself even when everyone else walks away. That kind of love cannot be taken from you. It does not depend on trends, on appearance, on age, on income, on status. It grows stronger each time you choose understanding instead of judgment. Little by little, your inner voice begins to change. Instead of asking, "Why am I never enough?" it quietly asks, "What would help me today?" Instead of saying, "I hate myself for making this mistake," it says, "I made a mistake, but I can learn from it." Instead of whispering, "No one will ever love me," it gently reminds you, "I am learning to become someone who never abandons myself." And perhaps that is where every lasting love story truly begins. Not with another person, but with the decision to finally stop being your own enemy. There may come a day when you look back on your life and realize something extraordinary. The greatest battle you ever fought was never against failure. It was never against difficult people. It was never against bad luck or impossible circumstances. It was against the voice inside your own mind that spent years convincing you that you were never enough. And perhaps the greatest victory will not be becoming richer, more successful, or more admired. Perhaps it will be waking up one ordinary morning, looking into the mirror, and feeling no need to apologize for the person looking back. Not because every flaw has disappeared, but because you finally understand that flaws and worth have never been the same thing. A cracked piece of pottery can still hold water. An old tree covered in scars still offers shade. A weathered lighthouse still guides lost ships safely home. Their imperfections do not diminish their purpose. In many ways, they become part of their beauty. Human beings are no different. The moments that embarrassed you, the failures that humbled you, the heartbreaks that nearly broke you, they have all shaped the wisdom you carry today. If you removed every painful chapter from your life, you might also erase the compassion that now allows you to understand others. You might lose the resilience that only struggle can build. You might never discover the quiet strength that appears only after surviving what once seemed impossible. So instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" perhaps a better question is, "What has this experience taught me about becoming more human?" That shift changes everything. Pain stops being an enemy. It becomes a teacher. Failure stops becoming a verdict. It becomes feedback. The past stops becoming a prison. It becomes a foundation. One day, someone may enter your life who loves you deeply. They may admire your strengths, encourage your dreams, celebrate your victories, stand beside you during difficult seasons. That love will be precious. But even then, remember this: they cannot replace the relationship you have with yourself. If your own heart remains a place of constant criticism, even the purest love from another person will eventually struggle to reach you. But if your heart becomes a place of acceptance, gratitude, and quiet respect, then every relationship in your life changes. Because you no longer ask others to complete you, you invite them to share a life that is already whole. This is the quiet freedom of self-love. You stop begging for validation. You stop shrinking yourself to fit someone else's expectations. You stop chasing perfection as though it were the price of belonging. Instead, you begin living honestly. You smile more naturally. You forgive more easily. You speak more gently. You dream more courageously. Not because the world has become safer, but because you have become safer for yourself. Imagine carrying a candle through a dark forest. The flame is small. It does not eliminate the darkness, but it gives you enough light to take the next step. Self-love works in much the same way. It does not remove every fear. It does not guarantee an easy life. It simply gives you enough inner light to keep moving forward. One conversation, one decision, one sunrise at a time. And over the years, those small moments become a life. A life not defined by perfection but by peace. Not remembered for endless achievement, but for authenticity. Not measured by how loudly the world applauded you, but by how faithfully you remained beside yourself. Oscar Wilde once wrote, "To love oneself is the beginning of a lifelong romance." Notice the word, beginning. He did not call it the destination. He called it the start. Because self-love is not something you accomplish once. It is something you practice every day. Some mornings, it feels effortless. Other mornings, it requires tremendous courage. Both are part of the journey. Some days you will forget everything you have learned. You will criticize yourself again. Compare yourself again. Question your worth again. When that happens, do not see it as failure. Simply begin again. Again. And again. Every sunrise offers another chance to become your own friend. Another opportunity to speak gently instead of harshly. Another reminder that you are worthy of patience, forgiveness, and hope. Perhaps one day you will discover that the love you spent your entire life searching for was quietly waiting within you all along. Not hidden because it was absent. Hidden because you had been looking everywhere except the one place it had always lived. Inside your own heart. So today, before you seek approval, before you compare yourself, before you decide that you are somehow falling behind, pause for just a moment. Place a hand over your heart. Remember everything you have survived. Every fear, every disappointment, every lonely night, every impossible decision. The person who carried you through all of it is still here, still breathing, still hoping, still capable of growing. Perhaps that person deserves your love more than anyone else, because they have never truly left your side, and they never will. So, be gentle with them, be patient with them, believe in them. For the longest romance you will ever experience is not written between two strangers. It is written, one ordinary day at a time, between you and the person you become each time you choose love over judgment. Choose that love today, and tomorrow, and every day that follows. Because a lifetime is built from ordinary moments, and every beautiful love story begins with a single choice: to choose yourself. There is another truth about self-love that many people never discover. Even after they learn to be kinder to themselves, even after they begin healing old wounds, there remains one final obstacle standing quietly in their way. It is the fear of being fully seen, not the fear of failure, not the fear of rejection, but the fear that if the world truly knew who they were, they might no longer be accepted. So they wear masks. Different masks for different places. One for work, one for family, one for social media, one for strangers, sometimes even one for the people they love the most. Little by little, they become experts at performing. They know exactly what to say, how to smile, how to appear confident, how to seem successful, how to hide the parts of themselves they believe are too much or not enough. The performance becomes so convincing that eventually they fool everyone, except themselves. Deep inside, a quiet loneliness begins to grow, because there is something profoundly exhausting about being loved for a version of yourself that does not truly exist. Imagine an actor who never leaves the stage, day after day, year after year. At first, pretending might feel exciting. Then it becomes tiring. Eventually, it becomes impossible to remember where the character ends and the real person begins. Many lives unfold exactly this way. People become so focused on fitting expectations that they lose touch with their own desires. They choose careers because they impress others. They remain in relationships because leaving would disappoint someone. They silence opinions because agreement feels safer than honesty. They spend years building a life that looks beautiful from the outside while quietly feeling empty within. And perhaps the saddest part is this: the applause they receive never reaches their heart, because somewhere inside, they keep thinking, they don't actually love me. They love the version I'm pretending to be. This is why authenticity is not merely a personality trait. It is a psychological necessity. A human soul cannot rest while constantly pretending. Eventually, The distance between who you are and who you pretend to be becomes too painful to ignore. That is often when people describe feeling lost, not because they have disappeared, but because they have spent so long becoming who everyone else expected them to be that they no longer recognize themselves. Self-love asks a frightening question. If no one were watching, who would you become? What dreams would you pursue? What opinions would you finally express? What boundaries would you establish? Whom would you forgive? Whom would you walk away from? How differently would you spend your mornings? How peacefully would you sleep at night? Most people answer these questions with silence, not because they have no answers, but because the answers threaten the identity they have spent years constructing. It takes courage to disappoint expectations. It takes courage to choose authenticity over approval. And perhaps the greatest courage of all is accepting that not everyone will understand the real you. There is a quiet freedom that arrives the moment you stop trying to be universally liked. Because it is impossible. No matter how kind you are, someone will misunderstand you. No matter how generous you become, someone will think you have not done enough. No matter how carefully you choose your words, someone will hear them differently than you intended. The pursuit of universal approval is a race without a finish line. There will always be another opinion to satisfy, another expectation to meet, another standard to chase. Self-love gently whispers, you no longer have to run. Imagine placing a heavy backpack on your shoulders every morning. Inside it are everyone else's expectations, your parents' dreams, society's definition of success, old comparisons, past failures, the opinions of strangers, the pressure to always be productive, the fear of disappointing people. For years, you carry this weight believing it is simply part of being alive. Then one day, someone asks, what if you don't have to carry all of that anymore? At first, the idea feels impossible. Without those expectations, who are you? Without constant pressure, what motivates you? Without endless comparison, how do you measure success? The answer surprises many people. You stop measuring. You start experiencing. Instead of asking whether your life looks impressive, you begin asking whether it feels meaningful. Instead of wondering whether strangers admire you, you begin wondering whether you admire the person you are becoming. Instead of chasing a perfect image, you start building an honest life. And honesty is surprisingly peaceful. Because honesty does not require remembering which version of yourself you showed yesterday. It simply allows you to exist. Children understand this naturally. A child laughs loudly without worrying whether it sounds attractive. They dance before they know whether they are talented. They ask questions before they fear looking foolish. Only later does the world begin teaching them performance. Don't embarrass yourself. What will people think? You should be more like. Slowly, authenticity is replaced with approval seeking. Confidence is replaced with comparison. Joy is replaced with perfectionism. Perhaps growing wiser is not about becoming someone new. Perhaps it is about returning to the fearless honesty we once possessed before the world convinced us that love had to be earned through performance. Because the truth has never changed. You were worthy before your first achievement, before your first failure, before your first heartbreak, before anyone applauded you, and before anyone criticized you. Your worth has always existed beneath all the labels you collected throughout life. The journey of self-love is simply the journey back to that truth. And once you begin walking that path, you realize something extraordinary. Freedom is not found in becoming everything the world expects. Freedom is found in finally becoming yourself. There is a beautiful moment that arrives in the lives of many people, though some do not recognize it until years later. It is the moment they stop asking for permission to be themselves. Not permission from society, not permission from family, not permission from friends, and certainly not permission from strangers scrolling through a screen. For most of our lives, we are taught to look outward before looking inward. We ask, do they approve? Will they like this? Am I doing what everyone else is doing? Our decisions become small votes cast in favor of acceptance. Slowly, without realizing it, we hand over the keys to our happiness. Someone compliments us, and we feel worthy. Someone ignores us, and we question our value. Someone praises our work, and we become confident. Someone criticizes it, and suddenly we doubt everything. Our emotional weather changes according to other people's opinions. Imagine living in a house where every stranger walking past could control the lights inside. One person turns them on, another turns them off, another changes the temperature, another rearranges the furniture. Eventually, you would no longer feel that it was your home. Yet, this is exactly what happens when our self-worth depends entirely on external validation. Every opinion becomes a command. Every criticism becomes a wound. Every compliment becomes a temporary medicine that quickly fades. But there is another way to live. A quieter way. A stronger way. It begins the moment you understand that confidence is not built by collecting approval. It is built by keeping promises to yourself. Every time you choose honesty instead of pretending, you strengthen that foundation. Every time you protect your peace instead of chasing acceptance, another brick is added. Every time you respect your own boundaries, your inner home becomes a little stronger. One day, you notice something remarkable. The world has not become less noisy. People still judge. Social media still compares. Success is still celebrated. Failure is still criticized. Nothing outside has changed. But something inside has. You are no longer searching every room for someone to tell you who you are. You already know. That knowledge cannot be purchased. It cannot be inherited. It cannot be borrowed from another person's love. It must be discovered through thousands of quiet choices that no one else ever sees. The choice to forgive yourself. The choice to rest when you need rest. The choice to walk away from what diminishes your spirit. The choice to remain faithful to your values, even when compromise would be easier. These choices rarely make headlines. No one applauds them. No one hands out awards. Yet, they shape the architecture of your character. Years from now, people may admire your confidence. They may wonder how you became so calm, so grounded, so comfortable in your own skin. They will see the result. They will not see the countless mornings when you chose compassion instead of self-contempt. They will not see the nights you spent questioning yourself, only to decide that fear would not have the final word. Real confidence is rarely loud. It does not announce itself. It does not compete. It does not need to prove anything. Like a mountain, it simply stands, secure in its own existence. There is another misconception about self-love that deserves to be challenged. Many people fear that if they truly love themselves, they will become selfish. But genuine self-love produces the opposite effect. When you no longer spend every waking moment wondering whether you are enough, you have more energy to notice the people around you. You listen more deeply. You give more generously. You celebrate other people's success without secretly comparing it to your own. You stop seeing life as a competition because you are no longer trying to win the right to exist. A person who is constantly starving for validation cannot easily nourish others. But a heart that has learned to receive its own kindness has abundance to share. This is why the healthiest relationships are rarely built between two people desperately searching to be completed. They are built between two whole people who choose to walk beside one another. Love becomes a gift instead of a rescue mission. Respect replaces dependency. Freedom replaces fear. And perhaps that is the greatest transformation of all. Self-love changes far more than the way you see yourself. It changes the way you see everyone else. You become slower to judge, because you understand how invisible another person's battles may be. You become quicker to forgive, because you remember how often you have needed forgiveness yourself. You become gentler, not because life has become easier, but because you finally understand that every human being is carrying burdens that cannot always be seen. The person who seems confident may secretly feel inadequate. The person who smiles constantly may be fighting silent loneliness. The person who appears successful may be terrified of failing. Once you understand your own hidden struggles, you begin to recognize them in others. Compassion grows naturally, and that compassion always begins at home. It begins with the way you speak to yourself on ordinary days, because the voice you use with yourself eventually becomes the voice you use with the world. If your inner dialogue is patient, your relationships become more patient. If your inner dialogue is forgiving, your relationships become more forgiving. If your inner dialogue is peaceful, your presence itself becomes a place where others feel safe. Perhaps this is the deepest irony of all. The people who learn to love themselves are often the ones who become most capable of loving others. Not because they have become perfect, but because they are no longer asking another human being to carry the impossible weight of proving their worth. Their cup is no longer empty. It overflows. And from that overflow comes generosity, kindness, presence, wisdom. The world does not need more people pretending to be perfect. It needs more people who are brave enough to be real. And every act of authenticity begins with one quiet decision: to stop asking the world for permission to become the person you have always been. Perhaps one day, many years from now, you will wake up to a morning that seems completely ordinary. The sunlight will fall through your window just as it always has. The birds will sing the same songs. The world outside will continue rushing toward meetings, deadlines, responsibilities, and endless expectations. Nothing about that morning will appear extraordinary. Except for one thing. For the first time, in a very long time, there will be peace inside you. Not because every problem has disappeared. Not because life has finally become perfect. But because the war you carried within yourself has finally come to an end. There is something profoundly beautiful about a person who no longer needs to fight themselves. Imagine how much energy we spend every day resisting who we are. We compare our bodies to impossible standards. We compare our success to carefully edited lives. We compare our timelines to people whose stories we barely know. We compare our beginning to someone else's middle. Then we wonder why we feel exhausted. Comparison is one of the few battles where winning is impossible. No matter how far you climb, someone will always appear to be higher. No matter how much you achieve, someone will always seem to have more. If your peace depends upon being better than everyone else, peace will always remain just beyond your reach. But something remarkable happens when you stop measuring your worth against another person's journey. Life becomes your own again. The clock stops controlling your heart. The opinions of strangers lose their authority. Success becomes deeply personal instead of publicly performed. You no longer ask, "Am I ahead of everyone else?" Instead, you quietly ask, "Am I becoming someone I respect?" That single question can change an entire life. Because respect grows differently than admiration. Admiration depends upon being seen. Respect depends upon being honest. There will always be people who misunderstand you. Some will think you dream too much. Others will think you dream too little. Some will call you too emotional. Others will say you are too quiet. If you spend your life trying to satisfy every opinion, you will eventually disappear beneath them. This is why self-love is not the absence of criticism. It is the refusal to let criticism become your identity. A tree does not stop growing because someone dislikes its shape. The ocean does not apologize because some people fear its depth. The stars do not shine less brightly because clouds temporarily hide them. Nature never asks permission to become what it was created to be. Neither should you. Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding about self-love is believing it is a destination. As though one day you will finally arrive and never doubt yourself again. But life does not move in straight lines. There will still be difficult mornings. There will still be seasons when old fears quietly return. There will still be moments when the voice of self-doubt knocks gently on your door. The difference is that now, you know you do not have to invite it inside. You can acknowledge it, listen to it, learn from it if necessary, and then allow it to leave. Without letting it decide who you are. That is emotional maturity. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to surrender your identity to it. When you begin living this way, something subtle begins to change. You stop trying to impress people. Instead, you start trying to understand them. You stop asking, "How can I make people admire me?" and begin asking, "How can I leave people feeling seen, valued, and understood?" Ironically, that is often when genuine influence begins. Because people rarely remember those who tried hardest to appear extraordinary. They remember those who made ordinary moments feel meaningful. Those who listened without rushing, who encouraged without judging, who loved without controlling, who accepted without demanding perfection. The people who love themselves deeply often become safe places for others, not because they have all the answers, but because they no longer carry the desperate need to prove they are enough. Their presence itself becomes peaceful. Perhaps that is the most beautiful consequence of self-love. It spreads quietly, like light entering a dark room. When you stop judging yourself harshly, you become slower to judge others. When you forgive yourself, forgiveness becomes easier. When you accept your own imperfections, you stop expecting impossible perfection from everyone around you. One healed heart has the power to soften countless others. This is how love changes the world, not only through grand gestures, but through ordinary people who decide that the cycle of shame will end with them. Maybe your parents were never taught how to love themselves. Maybe the people who raised you confused criticism with motivation. Maybe they carried wounds they never learned to heal. And perhaps, without intending to, they passed some of those wounds to you. But every generation receives two gifts. The first is what it inherits. The second is the opportunity to choose what it passes forward. You cannot rewrite yesterday, but you can write tomorrow. You can become the first person in your family's story who chooses compassion over condemnation, presence over perfection, understanding over judgment, acceptance over fear, and perhaps, years from now, Someone you love will feel safer simply because you first learned to become safe for yourself. That is how healing travels through generations. Quietly, patiently, one heart at a time. Oscar Wilde wrote, "To love oneself is the beginning of a lifelong romance." Notice what he did not say. He did not say it was the easiest romance. He did not say it would never face challenges. He did not promise there would be no misunderstandings, no disappointment, no difficult seasons. He simply called it the beginning, because every morning offers another opportunity to begin again, to speak to yourself with kindness, to forgive yesterday's mistakes, to celebrate today's small victories, to trust tomorrow without needing to control it. A lifelong romance is not built on perfection. It is built on returning after failure, returning after heartbreak, returning after self-doubt, returning after fear, again and again and again, until one day you realize that you no longer feel like two people. The person who dreams and the person who believes in those dreams have finally become the same. And when that happens, you stop searching for someone to rescue you, because you discover that the person who has quietly carried you through every storm, every disappointment, every lonely night, every impossible decision, has been with you from the very beginning. It was never a stranger. It was never fate. It was never luck. It was you, the person in the mirror who kept breathing when life became unbearable, who kept hoping when hope seemed foolish, who kept standing after every fall, who survived everything that once convinced them they couldn't. Perhaps they have been waiting for only one thing, not more success, not more approval, not another achievement, only your kindness, only your acceptance, only your love. So before this video ends, before you return to your busy life, pause for just a moment. Take one slow breath. Think of the person you have been speaking to every day for your entire life. The person who has heard every fear, every dream, every silent prayer, every word of self-doubt, every moment of courage. If that person were standing in front of you instead of inside you, what would you say to them? Would you criticize them? Or would you thank them for never giving up? Perhaps today is the day to say those words. Not tomorrow. Not when you finally become good enough. Today. Because life is shorter than we imagine. And the greatest tragedy is not leaving this world without being loved. It is leaving this world without ever allowing yourself to experience the love that was always possible. The love that begins when you stop treating yourself as an enemy and finally welcome yourself home. So wherever you are in your journey, remember this: you do not have to earn your worth. You do not have to become someone else before you deserve peace. You do not have to wait for the world's permission to believe that your life matters. You already matter. You always have, and you always will, because the greatest romance you will ever live is not the one that begins when someone else chooses you. It is the one that begins the moment you finally choose yourself.